Welcome back, everybody. I'm Nicole Gerard, and this is the Vertical Mindset Podcast. In today's episode, Sasja sits down with Andrew Lindesay, president of Dynamic Achievement, to discuss critical thinking skills, how they affect decision-making in business, and why these skills are oftentimes not where we would expect them to be and may even be on the decline.
Hi, I'm Sasja Chomas with Dynamic Achievement, and I'm here today with my colleague, Andrew Lindesay, president of Dynamic Achievement, and we are continually exploring and in conversation about topics that we're passionate about, the work that we do with our clients, and certainly what intrigues us and what we see as needs, as desires, and just the skills and competencies, and most importantly, the mindset needed for people in organizations to be successful. And today, one of the things I most wanted to talk to you about, Andrew, is critical thinking, because I know this is something that you're particularly passionate about. And even in our work, especially with a lot of the work we do with clients and in our leadership assessments, one of the things that's become very striking for me to notice in my work with you and our clients is how much critical thinking is not living up to the standards that we would expect and want to see. And so I really want to take the time today to explore with you, why is that the case? Why are we not seeing people's levels of critical thinking where we might have expected to see them? And what's the impact of that? So that's really where I want to start with you, and then to explore this idea, how can we as individuals, but also collectively in our organizations, work to improve critical thinking, especially in this age of so much change and complexity and a greater need, I believe, for critical thinking. So that's the big scope of what I want to explore in this series of podcasts with you. So let's start first even with just your take on why is it that critical thinking is just not where we would expect it to be? Why does critical thinking seem to be on the decline?
Sasja, I think you've hit the nail on the head that we're challenged right now with critical thinking. And I'm sure everyone's going to relate to this. Our lives are incredibly busy, fast-paced. People are being expected to multitask now. And businesses are expecting that if they send you an email at 10 o'clock at night, you're going to be responding by 10:05 at night.
That's so true.
We have this incredibly fast-paced environment. And so what's happening in business today is that leaders are faced with a multitude of challenges simultaneously. They have a fire pop up over here, and they quickly need to whack that one down, beat it out.
Yeah.
And then another one pops up over here, and they're dealing with that issue.
Yeah.
And so we've got this continuous eruption of new issues that have to be dealt with. And leaders are challenged to spend the quality time to thoroughly understand the more systemic issues of what is causing all these fires to pop up. And because they're spending so much time putting the fire out, that's right in front of them. So what's causing the big challenge today for us around the use of critical thinking is that we are multitasking. We are trying to deal with several issues simultaneously, and therefore we're not putting in the level of analysis into understanding more of the broad systemic issues that are causing challenges to us on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And we have less of a long-term view of what's going on.
Yeah.
I think that's what's the challenge.
Yeah, and I can totally appreciate that, both the multiple issues at play and then all the information and data that's coming in. I know even for myself sometimes it's like, wow, what do I pay attention to? And what do I even get my brain focused on in terms of pulling in information? How would you describe the impact that you're seeing with the clients, with the organizations you work with? Like, can you share any examples of the impact that it's having?
Yeah. I think because we are dealing with so many issues simultaneously, we're putting band-aids on those issues, and they're going to resurface again in another form.
Yeah.
I also think that in business today, there's quite a high level of emotion and stress and anxiety for all of us, not just in business, it's in our personal lives as well. Yeah. We try to do so many things. So there's a need to get rid of the issue quickly in hope that it's final. But because it's a band-aid and doesn't deal with the real issue, it's going to resurface again in another place.
Right.
I think that's one of the impacts. I think what's compounding it is the level of emotion in people that when emotion comes into the equation, and whether emotion is fear or whether it's just anxiety, it disrupts people's ability to think logically and analytically.
Right.
Basically, the emotions hijack their ability to be completely analytical.
Right.
And so in business today and in our family lives today, a lot of the decisions that we're making are being driven by an emotional urgency in us and preventing us from slowing down, thinking, processing, analyzing, doing root cause analysis. And so we are putting band-aids on multiple issues just to have them resurfaced.
Right. Right. And because it's expedient and I can feel better thinking, I have dealt with this, I've made that decision, or I've thought this through.
Yes.
And the reality is it's going to pop up again, whether I like it or not.
And touching on to the issue that we so often cover in the Vertical Leader program here is I get that dopamine fix. Oh, I just solved a problem. I've got another one behind me here.
Yeah.
And so we've got this problem-solving mentality, which is, I've got so many issues to deal with, and I'm getting rewarded from a dopamine perspective.
Right.
Every time I tick another box and say, I dealt with that one.
Yeah.
So we're getting rewarded for our short-term thinking.
Right, right. And so if we break this down then, like if we were really to strip it back and bring it back to, so what is critical thinking at its best?
Okay.
What does it look like? How do I know if I'm thinking critically or if I'm just being expedient, or, if I'm just maybe only dealing with, confirmation bias and I, only pulling from information that I already know and like? Where do I start in terms of critical thinking? Like, can you map that out for us?
I wish there was a linear path, but there's not. I think critical to being able to make good decisions is starting with the end goal in mind. What is it that I'm really trying to achieve here? Mm-hmm. What's really important? How do I know that that's important? Mm-hmm. What would ultimate success look like? How would I measure that I've actually achieved ultimate success?
Right.
Having clarity around the ultimate goal, whether it's a business outcome that you're trying to achieve, whether it's values that you're trying to have reinforced, if in your family it's what kind of children do I want to ultimately raise in terms of their values and their judgments and their thinking abilities, what do I really want to achieve here? And I think that's the starting point, is to have clarity about the long-term thing that's most important to you, and being very clear not only what it is but also why it's important to you.
Right.
Instead of jumping into the quick fix solution.
Yeah.
So I think you asked for what's the journey here. So be clear on the end goal you're trying to achieve. I think the second step, which is the step that trips us up the most, is being clear on what's your current reality that you're facing. Yeah. What is the situation in front of my eyes right now that is causing me some form of heartburn and anxiety and stress? And being, again, crystal clear around what's the gap between my current reality that I'm facing right now and where I'm trying to get to. And being clear that there is a gap here, a measurable gap. And if there is a measurable gap between where I am and where I'm trying to get to, what is causing that? What are the restraining forces or the barriers that are holding us back? And this causes or requires good root cause analysis.
Yeah.
And by root cause analysis here, I'm thinking about what are the true drivers, the true, real drivers of current performance versus desired performance.
Okay, so this is interesting. So say more about that in terms of these key drivers.
Right. I think that sometimes in business, instead of looking at things from a root cause perspective, we confuse causes and symptoms. And so an issue might have a series of symptoms that pop up, and what we do is we solve the symptom. We get rid of the symptom, right, thinking that actually is going to solve the problem, which it doesn't. It doesn't help move us forward. We're just removing a symptom. But if we can find out what is genuinely, through good analysis, good data gathering, good analysis of data, if we can understand what is really driving our current reality and holding us back, and what is driving us moving forward, and have a thorough understanding of that, and get it right, then we can work out how we can move from our current position to our future position.
Okay.
What I see happen, sorry to interrupt you, Sasja, what I see happening is, and I would put my money on this, 80% of the time, we're going to take a guess at that, is when a problem arises in business or in our lives, the symptoms pop up. We solve the symptom with the first solution that seems to come to mind.
Sure.
Because it's expedient and it gets rid of it. And most critical thinking is sabotaged because we have not put the upfront time into doing that true gap analysis between desired future and current reality and understanding it.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Even as I think of like own examples in my life where I sometimes have chosen expediency for the sake of resolving the immediate issue, even as a parent, right? And I can fall into that trap sometimes of, as a parent, my child is upset. And so sometimes because I want to get my anxiety over with, it's easy to just give in the expedient solution of, oh, okay, we'll just give her what will make her happy, as opposed to the long-term goal of what do I most want this child to learn?
Yeah.
How do I want her to grow up as a fully functioning, intelligent adult? And so translating that into the business world, of course, same thing, how those problems show up. And it's like, I just want to deal with the immediate and the expedient, which is often, I want to make this go away. Or I want it just resolved immediately. So,
and if we think of stuff that we cover from the neuroscience perspective, if we think of the statistic that 90% of the decisions that you and I make on a day-to-day basis are with our non-thinking brain, they're just automatic thinking, that's sort of how we go through life. Not thinking, solving the symptom, it goes away temporarily, we think we've resolved it, and then it comes back in another form or in a different form that's even worse.
Yeah. Because isn't that often the case, right? That the problem actually starts compounding itself. And now it's a much bigger, more complex issue than if we'd done some of that in proper analysis at the beginning.
Right, yes.
So what suggestion would you offer? Because here's where I'm most curious too, in terms of for people wanting to say, okay, so here's a problem. When we talk about root cause analysis, how do you help in your work with clients get them past, for example, things like confirmation bias, where the tendency is to just pull on and draw on information that I already know or that supports what my assumption or belief already is.
Right.
And so how do you help people really open up their thinking to pull all different kinds of data and analysis into the picture?
Right. Firstly, the issue of confirmation bias is normally non-conscious. Right. I don't know I've got confirmation bias, but I have. Confirmation bias, by its very definition, is I have sourced data that supports an existing hypothesis I've got, and I go further to keep looking for data that validates that I was right. And if you think about that's a normal phenomenon, I don't want to go out and prove myself wrong. So I think the critical issue here for me around critical thinking in business is to involve other key stakeholders where you can get people who specifically take a contrary viewpoint to yours. As part of what we call personal objectivity.
Okay.
We all suffer from confirmational bias, and we suffer from it every single day. And so what we need to do is when we're making group decisions is that we need to get people who put on a black hat and say, let me challenge that data, let me challenge that hypothesis. Let me give another perspective here that's different to the view you're holding. And we need to be unbelievably open that the worldview that we hold is not necessarily the truth or that worldview. It's simply our subjective perception of things, and other people are going to have different viewpoints.
Right.
And this raises then an issue of, in organizations, of positional power, which I think again detracts from critical thinking, is that oftentimes people with power, they believe that it's their role to make decisions.
To know it all.
Yeah, to know it all.
Yeah.
And they're in a hurry, they're busy, and so they may not adequately consult and get the perspectives of people around them.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying. And then added to that is the complexity that for the others who are not in that position of power, unless that leader really solicits that feedback, etc., the assumption is, well, I'll just tell the boss what I think he wants to hear, or I'll just share with her what she already believes anyway. And so people don't necessarily speak up with differing opinions, especially if they don't feel it's invited.
That's right.
Or solicited in any way, shape, or form. So the problem becomes further compounded.
And it touches now on the other issue of trust within organizations. Yeah. We talk about within organizations wanting to have flatter organizations, more consultative, more collaborative, more co-creative organizations. But still within our businesses today, there's a huge focus on positional power. Right. The boss at the end of the day controls my paycheck, my promotability, and my happiness in my job, the kind of work I even do. So employees today, whether we want to accept it or not, are still very, very aware of the power of their boss, and have to have a lot of courage and resilience and strength of character to be able to present a point of view that's contrary to their boss's perspective. And the leader has got to create that environment.
Absolutely.
So I think, just to wrap this little portion up here around organizations and what's causing it and the implications it's having, is positional power within a business is actually diminishing everyone's ability to think critically, to think rationally, to challenge, to disrupt the thinking of other people, because we try to preserve our jobs. Right. Because we know how hard it is to have a good job and to keep it.
Yeah, and to preserve those relationships too, right? If I don't want to rock the boat, I don't want to suffer any ill consequences. So a lot of that preservation. But I love what you're articulating in terms of the importance for business and the impact we're seeing and the results of as our critical thinking diminishes for the sake of expediency, for solving things quickly, for dealing with overwhelm.
Right.
The longer term consequences of what that can create for us individually and within our organizations. So what I want to explore with you next, because I know we've had some discussion around values and how that ties into critical thinking. So in our next podcast, I'd love to talk to you further a little about that and really tie those two subjects together.
Great, thank you, Sasha.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks
We'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Vertical Mindset Podcast. As always, for more information, you can visit us at dynamicachievement.com or reach us at info@dynamicachievement.com, where we would love to hear from you. Until next time, be vertical.